Hi, my name's Julie Ritson. In this video I'm going to take you through some of the basic settings for the Sony Z280, and I'm also going to show you some of the accessories we use in BBC news gathering operations. The Z280 is basically a junior version of the PXW Z450 because it shares many of the same features and functions. It's also a 4K upgrade on the popular Sony PXW 200. So what are the key improvements compared to its predecessors? It's a 4K capable camera that can record up to 60 frames per second. It can record hybrid log gamma or HLG. It features Sony's electronic variable ND filter. It has a digital extender mode that essentially doubles the camera's focal length when shooting in HD with little or no loss of light or image quality. It has a high resolution OLED viewfinder. It has the ability to transfer clips directly to an attached hard drive or SSD without the need for a computer. It has more robust streaming and wireless transfer functions. It has improved face detection autofocus. It has two multi-interface shoes for easy attachment of lights and wireless microphone receivers, and it has improved ergonomics and better balance. For news gathering, the other key advantage is how light the Z280 is compared to the PMW 500, between 3 to 5 kilograms compared to roughly 10, depending on what accessories are attached. Also, the connectivity capabilities of this camera will allow for file transfer over Wi-Fi and 5G, and the option to live stream direct to TX. There's lots more text and specs I could go through, but to keep this video reasonably short, I'm going to focus on the main functions that news camera crews will find most useful. Starting at the front, the Z280 has a fixed lens with a 17 times optical zoom. That's a 30.3 to 515mm equivalent in Super 35 terms. In 1080 mode you get a 34 times digital extender, which effectively turns that into 30.3 to 1030mm, so the zoom range is impressive. However, it would be nice if it was a little bit wider on the other end. This brings me to one of the first accessories we use, a Zunao WCZ280, which is a 4K wide-angle fully zoom-through conversion lens with a 0.83 times magnification and helps when filming inside vehicles or small spaces. The focus ring is currently in the forward position, which is manual focus mode, but this can be pulled back, revealing an orange band. In this full manual focus mode, you get focus markers and end stops. However, the macro mode and push autofocus buttons are disabled. To use these functions, the user has to push the focus ring forward again. MF will show up in the top left of the viewfinder, and now the user can press the push auto button for quick autofocusing whilst the button is held down. To activate the macro mode, leave the focus ring in the forward position. The macro button will now become active when switched on. This works in conjunction with the focal length, so it may take a few moments to find perfect focus, but I'm impressed at just how close I can get the lens to the subject. To use the face detection autofocus, again you need to have the focus ring in the forward position, and then switch on the autofocus mode. If you're not familiar with the face detection function, it recognises when people's faces are in the frame, and then focuses on them, even if they go out of shot and come back in again. In the menu there are two face detection autofocus settings. Face only detects the faces of people and focuses only on their faces. While a face is not detected, autofocus is temporarily stopped and the camera goes back to manual focusing. In face priority mode, the camera detects the faces of people and prioritises focusing on the faces. When a face is not detected, focusing remains in autofocus mode. When multiple individuals are detected, you can move the cursor to select a face, push the button and register that face. When a face is registered, the detection frame changes to a double frame. This is all well and good in theory, but how does it perform in practice? It's important to know that faces do need to be looking directly into camera. It won't work on profiles. But it performs really well, and in fact I tend to leave it on most of the time because with fast moving news events, the one thing you definitely want in focus is faces. So this is a really useful feature. Moving on now to one of the best functions on the Z280, the variable ND. Here I will let Mr. Sony explain.
Standard ND filters consist of fixed optical filters mounted in a filter wheel. If you want to change the value, then you simply select another filter, because the filter itself has a fixed value and cannot be changed. Polarizing ND filters, which use multiple polarized filters, offer more flexibility, but may suffer from artifacts and loss in image resolution. By contrast, Sony's electronic variable ND filter can be seamlessly varied while shooting. It is critical to note, Sony's technology is optically based rather than using image processing. There are 3 different ways to use this filter. Option 1 is to use the dial on the right side of the camera, seamlessly altering image exposure while shooting. The filter has a wide range from 1/4 to 1/128th. Option 2 is to select Auto ND, and the camera will proactively adjust the filter density to find the best exposure level for shooting. This is very helpful, for example, when shooting outside with variable lighting conditions. The electronic variable ND filter automatically adjusts the density so that the exposure will remain the same, no matter how light levels change. Option 3 offers you the ability to set fixed filter levels by simply rotating the filter knob, just like working with a conventional optical filter wheel. The default settings are 1/4, 1/16th and 1/64th. However, it is possible to change these 3 settings to whichever values you prefer. For example, you can set the filter number 3 to 1/128th so that you can go outside on a sunny summer day for shooting.
Okay, that's enough of that. But as you can see, this really is a huge leap forward in filter technology. You can now precisely control the exposure purely using the variable ND. It lets you set the ISO or gain and aperture to exactly what you want them to be to create a shallow depth of field or to eradicate diffraction. In case you don't know, diffraction occurs when you film at an aperture of below f8. It creates a soft focus image and looks awful, so always try to work at f8 or above. Now let's look at the assignable buttons. There are 10 in total. Numbers 7 and 8 are on the other side next to the zoom servo. These are already pre-assigned to direct menu and focus magnification. A quick note about the focus mag: you only get ×2 in HD, whereas it's ×4 and ×8 in 4K. The other assignable buttons are located in the middle section, with some also pre-assigned. But these can all be changed in the system menu, and some are left blank, such as numbers 5, 6 and 9. I've chosen to assign face detection to number 5, the digital extender to number 6 and Auto ND to number 9. But remember, you can choose any other option. These settings can then be saved onto an SD card in the utility card slot, but more on that later because I've created an all file setting specifically for news gathering, which includes all the other recommended menu settings. With the audio, there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is that we now get 4 audio channels. The bad news is there's no external monitor switch. That's now in the menu. But the Z280 is also one of the first cameras to get 2 MI shoes, which is a great improvement on previous models. This gives us the option to attach a dual radio receiver either at the front or at the rear. If attached to the rear, it then lets us attach a light to the front. Sony have their own LED light, but I'm using the Litra Pro, which is the smallest and brightest top light I've found currently on the market. This doesn't connect into the multi-interface though, it's just a cold shoe mount, and Sony have reassured us that this does not damage the fragile MI connectors. An alternative setup would be to use a T-bar in the MI shoe and have both the radio mic and the light mounted at the front. This requires an MI shoe to cold shoe adapter lead, which needs to be purchased direct from Sony. The external audio controls are fairly familiar. We're given switches for input 1 and 2 for line, mic and phantom power, and next to those are switches for internal and external mics, plus the MI shoe. Level controls are given for all 4 channels, but all other controls for channel 3 and 4 are in the audio input menu. The level control knobs are currently in the auto position, but a standard setup for news gathering is audio 1 to MI shoe for the radio mic, and we'll select a middle setting for the audio, then audio 2 on external, and I'll leave the level on auto. Also, I like the design of the cover, which stops the switches from being knocked, but does allow for level adjustment. Now let's take a look at the audio menu. The first thing you will notice is that there's no channel 1, only channels 2 to 4. This initially confused me, but the way it works is that channel 2 input has a sub-menu, input 1 and input 2. When you select input 1, the sound from the audio input 1 connector will be recorded onto both channel 1 and channel 2. When you select input 2, the sound from the audio input 1 connector will be recorded onto channel 1, and the sound from the audio input 2 connector will be recorded onto channel 2. So for the majority of news gathering filming, we would select input 2 with our top mic plugged into the input 2 XLR connector. Channel 3 input gives you input 1, internal mic, and the radio mic onto channel 1. Then channel 4 gives you the addition of input 2, internal mic, and the radio mic into channel 2. If you want to record sound from 4 separate sources, I suggest you use the dual radio mic into channels 1 and 2, and then hardwire into XLR inputs channels 3 and 4. There are other combinations you can also try. The audio inputs can be a bit confusing at first, so I've included these settings on my Z280 quick setup instructions, which can be downloaded from the News Gathering Editing Support website. There's also some other information on there, including how to do the back focus, and also a list of the exact news gathering menu settings compared to the factory ones. The next menu down is audio output, and here you get the full selection of mixed and solo audio monitoring. There's a lot of options, which probably explains why this is now in the menu. A quick and easy method is to leave this setting on a mix of channel 1 and 2, then just listen to your left and right headphones for solo monitoring. But if you want to use the menu, here's a quick tip to speed things up. The user menu is always at the top, and this can be customized to contain all your favorite menus. I have format media at the top, then audio output. Now I can quickly monitor channel 1, then channel 2, then back to a mix of both. To add this to the menu, scroll down to Edit User Menu. Select, scroll down to Add Item, select, pick the menu you want to add, like Flicker Reduce, select OK, and it's added to the bottom of the user menu. Under the LCD screen are the playback buttons, as well as a display on-off, volume, and another menu button. There's also a status button, which gives you 12 pages of information displayed on the LCD screen, as well as a very useful audio monitoring page, which shows you what mic is selected for each audio track. Moving to the rear of the camera now, and let's look at what connectors we have here. Next to the battery is the multi-micro USB, then below that is a USB 3 connector. The utility card slot only takes SD cards and is used for recording proxy files, which on the Z280 can be as high as 1920 by 1080, albeit in 9 megabits per second, but potentially good enough for news. This is also where you can load up and save user files, all files, and scene file settings. Just make sure you format the SD card in this slot first before using it for this purpose. Next down is the DC in, and then the HDMI out. Then over on the other side is the SDI out, timecode in out, Genlock in, video out, and the wired LAN connector. Under the rear viewfinder is the power on off, and to the side of that is another USB connector, which is where the network dongles and devices connect. The media card slots are on the other side of the battery. Under the cover there are two S/S card slots. However, do not mix different media cards in the slots because you won't be able to switch between them. I've done this just for demo purposes. You can use the S/S Pro Plus and Pro X series or the S/S 1 cards. However, if you try to use the S/S 1 card to record in XAVC-I format or for shooting slow and quick motion, an unsupported or not guaranteed media error message may appear on the screen. Therefore, Sony recommend S/S Pro Plus or Pro X cards when recording in XAVC-I. And it's always best practice to format any media card, new or used, in the camera before filming to avoid getting any unsupported media error message. If you want to record onto the cheaper SD cards, you will need to use the Meade SD02 adapter. You must also use the SDXC cards rather than the SDHC cards currently used in the PMW 500. This is because you can only use the FAT file system on SDHC cards. The Z280 also uses the exFAT file system, which has large limits on file and partition sizes, allowing you to store files much larger than the maximum 4 GB allowed by FAT32. SDXC cards can only use exFAT, but this does give us much longer record times. How long depends on which XAVC codec you use. XAVC-I, or intraframe, records each frame of video in its entirety. This means you get maximum quality and less chance of compression artifacts. However, the camera needs much more processing power and more expensive media cards to handle the higher data rates. With XAVC-L, where the L stands for long op compression, the camera records all of the first frame, then only records the new information, just the bits that have changed. This means that the camera has to record significantly less data in each frame because it's only recording the changes, which saves a lot of space and processing power. So for us in BBC News, where footage may need to go straight to air, we recommend you set your record format to frequency 50 Hz, exFAT, XAVC-L and 1920 by 1080i, which gives us smaller file sizes and longer record times on the cheaper SDXC cards. If you're filming for digital only, then alternatively you could use these progressive settings which they prefer. There are lots of other menus I could go through for this video, but I'll just stick to the remaining ones that are important. The Z280 offers two base settings. This selects the dynamic range mode, either standard dynamic range or high dynamic range. In deciding which to choose, the question is simple. Do you plan to colour grade or add LUTs to your footage in post-production? If the answer is yes, then HDR opens up various options from S-Log to hybrid log gamma. However, most news crews need their footage to be TX ready straight out of the camera, so we select SDR. In the camera menu, first up is Focus, which offers the face detection settings as on or off. It's currently off, but I have this assigned to button number 5, so it can easily be turned on. ND filter has 3 presets, but as you saw in the earlier Sony video, these can be changed to whatever you want. Gain has all the familiar settings, but with an additional high sensitivity mode, which adds roughly a stop and a half to a scene without adding any noise. Shockless gain, as with shockless white, just means it will come in gradually when engaged. Next down is shutter, and there are 2 modes, speed and angle. Speed expresses the shutter speed mode in fractions of a second. Angle expresses the mode in terms of degrees. Angle is a method they used in the days of film where they cut out different angles on a spinning disc. Some people still use it, but most prefer speed, so let's leave it on speed. Shutter speed should usually be set to 1/50th, but can go as high as 1/8000th. If you're filming in slow and quick motion at 60 frames per second, you might find you get better results if you choose a shutter speed at 1/120th. Going the other way and you enter slow shutter mode with 2 frames all the way up to 64 frames. You could use this to film stationary subjects in low light without turning on any gain, however focusing becomes much harder. I'll now skip down to the handle zoom. I have this on a low setting so that I can do very slow pushes in and pulls out when needed. And here's your auto flange back adjust, which is just back focus in old money. Now down to paint and the white menu. Here you can dial in your preset white and select what colour temperature you want. You can also do that on switch A and B, or you can do a white balance on a white card to ensure you get an accurate colour balance for that scene. The white balance set button is on the lower front of the camera near Assignable button 9. White setting gives us more controls, and the factory default is usually automatic white balance on switch B. However, I prefer to have this as another memory option, but it's up to you what you choose. The factory default for black is always slightly sat up, so you need to bring this down to -5. Gamma should be standard 5. In saturation mode, the knee should be off. Noise suppression should be high. Auto knee should be off, and white clip should be 102%. Now we come to detail. This is one of the settings that controls the look of the camera. Here you can make the image appear washed out or more colourful and vibrant. I prefer the latter, and after much experimentation, I found these following settings gave me the best results. Manual setting on, level +25, frequency -20, and black limit -30. The other important menu in Paint is the matrix. Leave adaptive matrix off unless you're filming in blue LED lighting, when it might help to put it on. And user matrix should be on. We've done audio, so I'll now skip to LCD viewfinder. In here you'll find peaking, and I prefer using the colour red, but again this is your own personal choice. It's set to off because it's an assignable button. Then Zebra is another personal choice. I use Zebra 2 set at 75%. This means that when the 75% threshold is reached, the zebras come in and stay on up until 100%. I know many users prefer Zebra 1 because that has an aperture range where it comes on and then goes off. This avoids zebras constantly appearing in bright sky where you know it's overexposed because you're correctly exposing for the rest of the scene. Timecode I usually have on clock because it helps identify a clip during a long presser. Just make sure you or your correspondent make a note of the time when you hear that perfect quote. In recording you'll find slow and quick motion, which might be greyed out depending on what codec you're using. Unfortunately, you only get a maximum of 60 frames per second rather than the preferred 120 frames per second, but maybe that will come with a future firmware update. I've produced this slow-mo by filming XAVCL in the highest progressive setting at 60 frames per second and selecting a shutter speed of 1/120th. I then slowed it down even further in the edit by 25%. Picture cache is really useful because it automatically records the scene before you press the record button. On the Z280 you get up to 28 seconds, and this is great for capturing the moment someone walks out of the door without any warning. As I mentioned earlier, all of these menu settings can be saved in the camera and onto an SD card. This is useful because it gives you a default setting that you can upload into different cameras or recall if you've changed any of the settings for a particular reason. In File you can save just the user menu, or all files, or just scene files. In the All File menu, I have a few different options saved onto the card in the utility card slot. But the default one for news gathering, which has all of the menu settings we've just gone through, plus a few more, is News G001. This can be downloaded from the editing support website. Just follow the instructions, and also don't forget to download the quick setup card as well. And one last thing to remember, in System menu, you will find the current firmware version that your camera is running. Mine is version 3. However, I've just noticed on the Sony website that a new version 3.10 has been released, so I will have to do an update. Right, that's enough of the menus. If you want to learn more, please take a look at the Sony manual. Now let's look at the various camera support accessories in the BBC Z280 kits. The camera comes with one BP U30 lithium-ion battery and a BC U1A charger. In addition to this, there are two Hawkwoods BP98 UX batteries, one BP75 UX battery and a BP MX2 charger. As an optional extra, you can also get an IPWR USB adapter that plugs into the D-tap, but this is not supplied in the standard BBC kits. For crews who still want to use their V-Lock batteries, there's an adapter that slots into the battery carrier and plugs into the DC connector. One word of warning, however, is that this may restrict the use of the rear viewfinder. If you want to attach a radio cam, the most secure way is to use a separate V-Lock plate mounted on short bars, which then goes into the rear of a shoulder mount base plate. The best shoulder mount rig we found at the time of testing was the Shape BP10 base plate, which comes with short and long bars, the Shape Hand 3 telescopic handle, the Shape FS5 RH extension handle, the Sony Smart Grip, which is the same as on the FS5, and the Shape rod block with rosettes. Now you can use the camera without any of this, but I'm going to show you my preferred setup. I release the side locking lever, push up the release lever, slide the base plate off the shoulder mount plate, and then I can attach that to the base of the camera. Now let's fast forward, and once that's on, I can slide it back onto the shoulder mount base plate. Just make sure that you lock it securely and that it has a solid hold. On the bottom of the Shape BP10 is a VCT universal base plate, so you can still use the V-Lock base plates currently used by news crews for the PMW 500. However, I like to have a bit more flexibility, so I attach the extra Sachtler 1064 Euro plate onto the VCT. This allows me to use the Manfrotto monopod, which has a Sachtler 1091 quick release touch and go plate. And in the middle is a Manfrotto tilt head, which is frictionless but lets you lock the camera in the right position for, say, filming over the heads of people in a camera scrum. This attaches really quickly onto the monopod and gives a secure hold on the camera. The monopod can be used in the traditional fully extended mode, or you can collapse the sections back up and place the end into the waist pouch, which, along with a body harness, are also supplied in the BBC kits. What's good about this setup is that the camera can quickly go from monopod to tripod without the need to change the camera base plates. What I love about the Shape handle is this big red button that lets you move them into any position. When on the tripod, you can move them back so it replicates a studio style camera. This gives you a more comfortable position for panning the camera and for controlling the zoom if, for example, you're doing lives all day. If you're using the camera without the rig, then another option is the Liebeck zoom and focus controller that can attach to the tripod handle and connects via LANC to the remote jack. One issue I found with the Z280 is that the rear viewfinder doesn't tilt down beyond the horizontal. This means it's hard to use when the tripod is at full height. We couldn't find a viewfinder hood specifically for this camera, so we decided to design one and get it 3D printed. This slots onto the LCD screen, the rubber O-ring loops around the back and secures on the other side. Under the eye cup is an optical filter. You get 4 to choose from, depending on the strength of your eyesight. With the rig fully assembled, it sits comfortably on the shoulder. It might just need minor adjustments to ensure that the J-loop sits in the correct position for your eye. On my right hand, I've got zoom and record controls, as well as assignable buttons 4 to 6. And one quick user tip, fold the left handle into your chest for support without using your left arm. Another problem we had to solve was the rain cover. Because we add so many accessories for news gathering, I had to get one custom made. This has 2 buckles underneath to stop the wind catching it. The LCD sleeve is big enough for the J-loop. and there's extra fabric at the top to cover the radio mic and allow access to the handle. We also made it long enough to get full coverage when using it on the shoulder mount rig. The Sony Smart Grip has its own cover that secures with a toggle and has a slit in the side for your hand. This doubles up as a bag for the main cover. A full list of accessories is available in my Z280 user report, which also covers many of the topics I've discussed in this video. It's available to download from the editing support website. And so we come to the end. I hope you found this video useful, and good luck with all your future filming assignments.